It is Friday, and welcome to Burr Cash Flow Investors. If you're not a member, make sure you join the group and be a part of the community. And the whole community is set up for everybody to pitch in, grow, so participate in the discussions on Facebook, in a bunch of these webinars that we do basically on, and we're doing these about 3 times a week. So make sure you participate, be a part of the group. Today, we're going to kind of go through, today it was supposed to be story time, but there was a property that came in, and I was talking to somebody from Mastery today, and I thought, why not we kind of change it up a little bit and go through this particular property, and then we'll kind of discuss if this property makes sense. Does it make sense for them to buy it? Does it make sense for them to cash flow it? Does it make sense for them to do a Airbnb? What should they be doing? So we'll kind of talk about it. Whenever somebody is in Mastery, right, we always look at what is the profile of the investor, meaning who are they, where are they coming from. Then we're going to look at, because what most people do is generally, if they find a deal, the first thing they want to know is, oh, what should I do? Right? Well, what you should do with a deal, whether you flip it, whether you wholesale it, whether you rent it out, whether you do Airbnb, it's all going to depend on your situation, or as we like to call it, on your profile. Meaning, what is your, where are you coming from? Just because I do something doesn't mean you should be doing it. We have to look at where are you today? And then, so our goal for all of us is, what do we want from real estate? We all want to get to a place where you have way more cash flow coming in than what goes out. So hypothetically, let's just say every month your expenditure is $6,000 a month. And so you can have 2 types of earnings, right? If you're basically working, you're running on a treadmill and then paying your bills and you're spending $6,000. So your goal, first goal to me should be is, what is your expense that goes out every single month? Meaning, how much does it cost you to live? That's the income you should try to get to as quickly as possible from cash flow, because then you have ultimate freedom, is what I believe. So, but sometimes what you have to do, be able to do is, you have to kind of, if you want to grow and build a portfolio, sometimes you have to do a little bit of flipping first. Maybe sometimes you have to do a little bit of wholesaling first, and then jump into doing long-term rentals, Airbnbs today. But sometimes it's not possible for some people to start suddenly doing flips. There's a lot of people in Mastery that did 3, 4, 5 flips first, or 3, 4, 5 wholesales, and then they jump into doing long-term rentals and start building wealth, right? So it's important in what order we treat this whole thing. So you have to keep that in mind. So having said that, today, basically, we're going to talk about a couple of people from Mastery. They're working on a deal. So I'm going to show you guys the property, but I don't want to give their information out yet, because they're basically finalizing all these things. But I'll kind of show you guys the property really briefly, so everybody has an idea of exactly what the property they're dealing with. So share screen. Entire screen and share. Hey, Jennifer, why am I not able to share the screen? Huh? Huh?
You could share your screen, but let me see.
So
You have to click this,
I did.
and then you have to have it on the window that you want.
Okay.
What are you trying to share?
Yeah, so entire screen.
Or pick what you want to share.
Oh,
Yeah.
I want to share this.
Okay.
Just put share.
All right. I'm able to share the screen.
Oh, you don't have the permissions.
Okay.
Want
to put it on this?
Well, it's going to be too late. Anyways, unfortunately. So next time, turn on the permissions, right? Our computer doesn't have the permissions. So anyways, so here's what they're buying. They're buying basically two solid brick 2-unit buildings. So each of them is a 1-unit building. And this is basically this is somebody from Mastery. And so there are two buildings. Now, this is their very, very first deal in Mastery. So as far as their sales price, what they're buying the property for, it's going to be, hey, give me a piece of paper, man.
Like a scratch notebook?
Yeah, and a pen. So they're buying the property for $190,000 each, right? So $190 each. So you and I are going to do this math together. And so we're going to figure this out for them. So here's the deal, right? Each unit is $190,000. So times 2, basically, they're going to be in it for about $380,000, right? Now, in terms of rehab, these units are in pretty decent condition. So if they decide that they want to just rent them, they can rent them as is, right? And I wanted to show you guys the pictures for that reason, but unfortunately, we're having a little bit of malfunction today. Both the properties are in really, really good condition. So they're like, oh my God, Andrew, the back end value on these is really, really high. So my first point to them was, they're like, well, what are you guys thinking about doing? So they're like, oh my God, the back end value is really, really good. We're just going to keep it. We're not going to sell it. I'm like, well, why? Why wouldn't you sell it? They're like, but I thought you said that we should be building wealth. We should have cash flow coming in, right? And they're like, well, what? I'm like, what do you guys do? They're like, well, we're in the construction business. Good. I'm like, do you guys own your own home? They're like, well, not really, right? I'm like, do you guys have any savings? Their answer was, well, not really. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Not really, or yes or no? They're, well, no. Okay, that's fine, right? So I'm like, is this the first and last house you're ever going to find? Well, not really. You mean you're going to find more? Yes, good. So basically, the situation for them is they already are in construction, right? Both basically they're contractors, right? The husband's contractor, wife manages the business, so on and so forth. And the question becomes is this, that for them, they can get the rehab done pretty easily, right? If they're going to do a flip, they'll probably spend about 15 or 20,000 each per property. Now, here's the cool part, right? So we'll just deal with one property and then we'll just double the numbers because both properties are owned by the same owner. They were found because the owner had not basically paid the taxes and they were going to lose the property to the tax buyer, right? These properties are coming up. So that's kind of how these properties were found. So they were found basically on the hot list for properties that they had not paid the taxes. And it's been about 3 years. So now it's going to go to deed if the properties aren't bought. So $190,000 each. Now, here's the question that becomes the more pertinent question. In their particular situation, they do construction. And so their income is based on the husband going out there, doing a bunch of jobs, and then basically bringing income in because of that, right? The situation for them is that they don't have any savings, right? They're basically, whatever jobs he does, whatever they make okay money, but they don't have any sort of a bandwidth. That's the first thing to understand. So the second thing, when I looked at their profile, I'm like, okay, how old are you guys, right? And it's not that it matters if you're young or old, but it matters from a standpoint of what you should be doing based on where you are in your life. So if somebody's 19 and 20, they're just getting started. They have a little bit of time on their hands, right? For somebody, if you're a person that you have young kids, little kids, you can't afford to take those kind of risks. You have to think about, okay, where am I going to be? What are my responsibilities at home? If you're somebody single, you don't have as much to worry about, right? You don't have other people to worry about. So in their particular case, they have little kids, right? So for them, it's not like they can just go and start doing whatever it is they could have done, husband and wife, when it was just the two of them. So in this case, my point to them was, I'm like, guys, listen, before you start doing rental properties, right, you need to have a little bit of a cushion so that by the time you get the property done, by the time you get the property refinanced, what if a tenant comes in late? What if a tenant doesn't make any payments, right? It's going to really, really put a strain on your budget. So even though this off the bat is like, oh my God, I don't want to sell it. I don't want to be greedy. Like in this case, you're not being greedy if you consider selling the property, right? So this is important to understand the framework. They're like, but it's a great property. We don't want to sell. I'm like, I understand that, right? Every time you sell a property, you should feel bad because you should always want to keep the property. It's an asset that you found. But I'm like, in this particular case, it makes sense to kind of keep the whole thing in perspective. Now, they have another option, and another option is they could possibly do an Airbnb because it's two of them. And I'm like, well, one person can live in one person can live in one. And guess what? It's in Chicago, so you can Airbnb the other one out, and then your husband and wife, the properties are right next to each other. These are two-unit buildings, and you'll basically get a really, really good income out of it. The beautiful part about this is a really, really, really nice location in terms of where that particular property is located, right? So we know it's going to have a very strong income in terms of an Airbnb. We know that, right? Every single month, if they do an Airbnb in that particular area, just from one building, they're going to net out somewhere around $5,000 net every single month just from one building, right? So two buildings, that's $10,000. Yahoo, right? They're done. But the problem is they really can't pull this off themselves right now, right? They'll be able to pick up the loan for one property from Mastery. They'll be able to get a private money loan fairly easily from Mastery for about $220 or so. That won't be a problem. But I don't feel okay to put them in a position where they have two. Now, the question becomes is this: even if somebody in Mastery gives them the full amount of loan for the purchase, full amount of loan for the rehab, so that's another, maybe for an Airbnb, it's going to be about $35,000. It's not $35,000 to $40,000. It's not going to be done for $20,000. And they said that they have enough credit cards where they'll buy all the furniture on that, and on the refi, basically pay that back. So they're willing to do that. They're willing to have some skin in the game. But when I look at this particular situation, so let's start with number one, right? Both of them, in terms of age, they are 29 and 32 in terms of age, husband and wife, right? So when I look at them at 29 and 32, they're still relatively young, but they have two young children. So when you think about it, that for somebody who's a contractor, if you hurt yourself, guess what? You're out of work, right? I mean, that's just how it is. So it's critical that they get to a cash flow number, which we call their LPN, as quickly as possible. But it can't be done in a way that we put them in a difficult situation. So in this particular situation, what they could do a couple of things. So at 190, the back end value, meaning the ARV on these properties, once fixed up, it's somewhere close to about 370 a piece, 370,000 a piece. In as-is condition, they will get, I feel pretty confident they would get 320,000 in as-is condition, maybe even 330 they would get, right? In the condition that it's in, because it's in pretty good livable condition. And if they fix it up a little bit nicer, it'll be 370. If they really do a nice job, it'll go into 400s, right? But that's not really, they don't want to get tied up into doing a complete rehab to get it into the 400s. So in this case, they have a couple of choices. They could basically go ahead and take on a partner and then do both of the transactions. That is something that they could do. Or they could go ahead and wholesale the property. If they just wholesale the property right now, right? Pretty much, I would buy the property from them, no questions asked, right? And they would end up making about $25,000 per 2-unit. I would have no problem paying that, like in a heartbeat. They would have to do nothing. Even the earnest money I will put up, right? Because I feel the properties are really good. I feel I have some plans in my head that I can do with those properties, and I feel they'll be very, very lucrative. But in all honesty, I think I am not the right buyer for those properties because I'm not going to pay the amount of money that they could wholesale those properties for to someone else, right? So it would make a lot more sense for them to not wholesale it to somebody like me, right? Because I'm going to be tight with my funds. It makes a lot more sense that they basically go ahead and wholesale the property or just put the property back on the MLS, if at all possible, and go ahead and sell the property and then take in the profit, right? Because in their particular situation, even though the cash flow is very strong, if they do an Airbnb, it would be really, really strong. This is going to be a tough situation for them to swing it, to be able to make payments, to get that thing performing, right? And so the way we came up with a business plan for them, my point to them was, hey, listen, you need to start building a little bit of reserves, and this one property, as tough as it is going to be to let it go, right? What you're going to do is this. You're basically going to borrow money on one property from Mastery, and you're going to get the reserve funds. And then on the other one, you're basically going to put it on the market. And then on that one, you're going to give a little bit of a partnership to the lender that you borrow the money from, because you're not going to get straight to loans on the other one to sweeten the deal a little bit, because this is your first time doing this, right? Even though you have an excellent property, you give the lender a little bit of a sweet deal where they'll take a little bit of a partnership. So instead of just doing a 2 points and 1% a month, the lender will make a little bit more. And the way you should do this is that you're not going to make any payments because the lender is a lending partner. And one property, you're going to buy it in your in your LLC name. The second property, whoever you're borrowing the money from, they're going to keep that one in their LLC name. That way their money is protected. They've already given you money on one of them, and on the other property, they're protected, right? And then when you sell it, you're going to basically end up doing a 70-30 split, right? So they're like, well, why are we doing it that way? Why don't we traditionally get a traditional loan? I'm like, because think about this. If you get a loan on 2 properties, right? The properties, you're going to borrow about $220,000 or so. So what is that in terms of points? In terms of points, you're going to pay about $5,000 right up front. But that comes from the loan that the lender gives you. So that's fine. But how are you going to suddenly start making payments on 2 properties? Because on 2 properties, 1% a month is going to be $2,200 each. So that's going to be an additional $4,400. I'm like, listen, do you have that much extra income right now? Well, not really. They're like, well, we would really, really, really be in a very tight position if we did that. I'm like, well, why do you want to do that? Why not go ahead and buy one property that becomes yours, that you get to keep, and on the other one, you do a 70-30 split, meaning let the lender enjoy, so they're your partner basically, where they're taking 30%, right? As long as that 30% is a little bit higher than what they would make on just doing a pure straight out Mastery loan with private money, right? Give them a little bit piece, right? As Godfather would say, let them wet their beak also, because it's going to be a very profitable deal for you. Make sure they are making good money. So what they will find, they'll be excited about funding your further deals. And here, you're giving them a pretty sweet deal. So on one property, if they wholesale that, if they put that property on the market and they do basically just basic, like literally a basic paint job, and they can put it right back on the market. They don't have to do anything else, right? I feel 99.9% confident. There's no such thing as 100%, right? I feel 99.9% confident that they can get about $335,000 or so in that ballpark for that one property, right? So what that means is if they're buying that particular property for 190, they have some closing costs. They're about 5,000-6,000 in other costs. Then they're going to have some costs in terms of painting, cleanup, that sort of thing. Another 10,000-15,000 bucks. Their all-in cost in that property is going to be somewhere around, give or take, let's just say about 215 or so, right? And then they're going to go ahead and sell the property. Now, the beauty of this particular situation is the person that I suggested to them they should borrow the money from happens to be a real estate agent, and that person is willing to put the property on the market for them at a little bit kind of a deal in terms of a commission wise, and they're willing to sell the property. So in this case, it's somebody that they're borrowing money from, that they get to partner with them. The other person will get a little bit more money because they're going to list it, but these guys get a deal. So literally between the sale and the whole thing, I believe they're going to net out somewhere around 95,000 bucks net, right, at the time of sale, if they put the property on the market on MLS. If they don't put it on the MLS, then they're going to make a little bit less, because on the MLS, the market in that area is ridiculously hot. And somebody is going to come in and pay an obscene amount, right? We're in the middle of summer. We're going into summer vacations for kids, that sort of thing. So right now, what would happen is one party would end up walking away with about 27,000 bucks or so, ballpark the lender would, and these guys would walk away with somewhere around 65,000 bucks. The beauty is they don't have the burden of carrying the property. So they get to build reserves on one property because they can take the $65,000 in profit, and then the other property, they can basically do a mastery loan, which is a private money loan, and then they're going to get it rehabbed, move in one of them, because I'm like, hey guys, you guys don't have a place that you guys own. So you're going to go ahead and move in it. They have decent credit. So we're going to basically do a refi at a later point. But for right now, they're just going to go ahead and move in it, and then put the top floor for Airbnb, or bottom floor for Airbnb. Top floor is where they're going to live in it, and just refinance it, pay the lender back, and they're done. And they get to keep $65,000 in their pocket. So in this particular case, it didn't make sense for them to sell both properties, even though if they sold both the properties, oh my God, right? Suddenly they would have a chunk of change, right? Because when I went through the numbers with them, they're like, Andrew, we've never had this kind of money. I mean, that would be like $120,000, $140,000. And I'm like, guys, listen, it would not make sense for you to suddenly have that kind of money, right? Because number one, it's going to get you very tempted to go do something, right? Buy a car, do something exciting. And there's nothing wrong with that. But let's just have a little bit delayed gratification, right? It's much better for you to keep one property. And then when you refinance it, if you want to get a little bit extra money out on the refi, you can do so, because then you'll add that to the 65 and you'll be literally at almost $100,000 in reserves. Now it changes your whole equation, because now you're in a position where you can literally scale up at a very, very, very fast pace. And I'm like, stick to what you're doing, because you're Hispanic, stick to Hispanic areas, because nobody is targeting these off-market properties in Hispanic areas. They're like, no, but we want to go to even nicer areas. I'm like, listen, Hispanic areas, a lot of them are great bread and butter areas, great family neighborhoods. It makes sense to stay there. That's your strength, right? Why not use your strength? Stick to those areas, because other people are not as sharp. They're not going in those areas, and you already have a familiarity, right? Literally, you should be looking up and down the street. So we looked at a kind of a, 10-block radius both ways. And we found is that there are close to about 30, 35 pre-foreclosure properties just within that vicinity. And so my point to them was, hey, listen, there's about 35, 37 of these properties that we know are pre-foreclosures. So we know they're going to go to auction at some point, or somebody's going to buy them. Before that, why not you? And so they're like, Andrew, so you're just saying just keep buying the same area? I'm like, do you think it's a great area? Yeah, we think it's a great area. Well, then why would you want to go make it complicated? Just what if you could own within a 10-block radius, 12-block radius, you could own 10, 12, 15 of these buildings, right? It would be a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I wanted to bring that example up because a lot of times what happens is people get this idea that, oh my God, I have to do rentals. Oh my God, I have to do Airbnbs. Guys, listen, you have to do what makes the most sense, what's going to help you go from where you're at. Because today what I do, right, I did not start out here. I started out with doing a bunch of flips and then one rental, then 2, 3 flips, then one rental. Then I could do 2 flips, 1 rental. Then I did 1 flip, 2 rentals, then 1 flip, 3 rentals, then 1 flip, 4 rentals, right? Eventually I got to a point where I had so much cash flow that I don't necessarily have to do any flips anymore because there's so much cash flow that comes in from the rentals. But guess what? Sometimes you have to build it, because I was in real estate full time and I had quit selling real estate as a real estate agent. So it made much more sense to keep producing money here and then do a rental too. Now, it took me a little bit of time to grow, but I did not have the support of Mastery. I mean, there was no such thing at the time. I didn't have this kind of private money lenders that exist today. But in their case, literally this one property, by the time they sell the first one of the units and the second one they refinance, they'll literally have close to $100,000 net in their pocket, right? And the beauty of that whole thing is that on the 65 that they make, they're going to have to pay taxes. On the stuff that they refinance, they are not going to have to pay taxes, because why? It's refied money, right? And that's the beauty of this whole situation. If it's set up correctly, I mean, they can really, really, really hit a home run given the particular scenario. And it does not make sense for them to keep both of them, because that will put unnecessary burden on them, because that was their first instinct was, oh my God, we don't want to sell it. That's what you say all the time. I'm like, no, you have to be strategic, because sometimes slowing down will speed you up, right? So that is really, really important to understand and to keep in mind. Hopefully you got some value out of that. It's Friday today, so we will end early and have a good, safe weekend, and we will talk to you. What?
It's 6 o'clock.
Oh, it is 6 o'clock. Okay. We will talk to you on Monday. And remember, invite your friends, invite your family, because remember the giveaway we have. And guys, the July 3-day is coming up in a hurry on 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. And especially the VIP tickets, they go fast. So make sure you go to Andrew Holmes Events and register. Again, that's andrewholmesevents.com and register. And we look forward to seeing you either at the next RIA meeting, or we'll see you at the 3-day. Thanks a bunch. Have a good day.